Hello and welcome to the Everyday Amazing podcast. I'm your host, Simon Platt, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Corrine Thomas. Corrine is an experienced leader, coach, and business analyst with over 30 years of working across a range of industry sectors. Corrine is director of the BA Managers Forum and a mentor for apprentice BAs. Corrine is passionate about helping people make choices in their career to balance work and well-being. And alongside her work as a business analyst, she delivers leadership and careers coaching and run the outdoor well-being programs. When not working, Corrine loves to be outdoors and has been lucky enough to visit the Himalayas several times, where she has trekked in Nepal and in Bhutan, which is what we're going to get into. Hi, Corrine. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Hi, Simon. It's great to be here, and thank you for inviting me. I'm very good, thank you, but also listening intently to the storm that's outside. I'm thinking, do we really want to be talking about being outside when there's a massive storm raging outside my front door? But hey-ho.
Very true. We had it not long ago, about an hour or so ago. The howl was absolutely insane. And of course, my 12-year-old boy, the first thing he does is want to run out there, closely followed by myself. So yeah, good times.
But then I know we're going to talk about walking and being outdoors, but I think that's one thing I learned very early on, is that you can have a bright sunny day when you leave, but you always take your rainwear with you, because you never know what's going to happen.
So just to set the scene then for the listeners, in terms of how we know each other and the sort of broad topic we're going to discuss. So we're both business analysts by profession. And I think we probably met about 9-10 months ago and become sort of connected and through LinkedIn and so on and so forth, and done a little bit of coaching since. But what I'm really keen to talk to you about was I saw in a recent webinar where you spoke about some of the trekking you've done in the Himalayas and some of the opportunities that had opened up for you. And I was just fascinated by it. As somebody that has a sense of adventure, a sense of wanderlust, that really kind of captured my imagination, really. So I'm really keen to kind of learn more about that today. And I thought the best place to start with is you've actually summited Kilimanjaro, correct?
I have indeed, yes.
Yeah. So I'd like to tell us about that.
Yeah, so I've always walked and done a lot of walking in the UK. But Kilimanjaro, I'd never really thought about Kilimanjaro. And my other half, my husband, decided he was going to do it for his 40th birthday. And I'm slightly younger than him. And I just, off the cuff to him one day, said, I think I'll do that as well. But we couldn't go together because the children were at school, exams and all that kind of thing. So he did it one year and then I did it the next year. And I'd never really been to altitude before, never done anything like that before, not really trekked outside the UK before, from what I can remember. So yeah, it was certainly an experience, and I did it for charity, so it was a charity trek. It was done over, I think the whole trek was a week, but the actual Kilimanjaro bit was 5 days. So it was, and it's one of those ones you start off at the beginning and it's like a nice little stroll through the lower slopes and lots of forest around you. And the leaders keep saying to you, go slow, go slow, go slow. And you do, and they encourage you to slow down and chat. But, there's always that thing of, well, where's the summit? We got to get to the summit. But you do go slow, and you gradually go higher, and you stop off at sort of camps on the way. And it's probably, I'm trying to think now, it was day 2 or day 3 in, you have what they call an acclimatization day. And I can't remember the heights, to be honest, off the top of my head, but it's probably about somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 meters. And you just spend a day there. And it's at that point you start to notice that, this is getting quite tough. And it's the altitude. And it doesn't always hit you immediately, the altitude. Yeah. But it is challenging. And I was really, really lucky, actually, to begin with. I did, and apart from the fact I felt the walking became harder, I didn't have a lot of other symptoms of altitude sickness. Obviously, they're watching out for it all the time. You are briefed about things to look out for, to be careful. It's about breathing. And you can get pulmonary edema or cerebral, so in the brain. So you've got to be really careful. So everyone's encouraged to watch out for each other. So it was a great trip from that. Everyone's bonding, everyone gets on really well. And I have to say the last bit was really tough because you go up and you've gone up the steps and you camp at something called Kibo Hut, which is just before what they call the summit. bit where, it's sort of volcano, so you've got sort of the steep bit and you're going up to the summit, but you rest during, you get there at sort of lunchtime, you rest and try to sleep, which nobody could. Because there's the excitement and the altitude is neither of those add up to going to sleep. But you basically set off after dark, about 6 p.m, I think. Go up the side of this slope all night, because the idea is that you reach the summit at dawn. Mm-hmm. And we always set off and you trudge along behind each other. And at this point, you're over 5,000 meters up. And that's when it got really tough, very, very tough. And you see people stopping, and it was really, really hard. I didn't think I was going to get to the top. There's a place you get to called Gilman's Point, which is on the top of the ridge of the volcano. And I found it hard going, and I got there, and quite a lot of people did. But I was finding it really tough by that point. So I kind of sat down and thought, well, this is my lot. I'm not going to make it to Uhuru, which is the summit. Mm-hmm. So had a bit of a rest, had some water. And the guy that was with me went, well, come on then, we're going to the summit. I'm like, what? I'm not sure I can. But I got up, and the last bit was completely different. It was amazing. It wasn't quite so steep, but it was like a gentle walk round. And I'm so glad I did it, because we arrived at the summit just before dawn, and then we saw obviously the sun coming up, and above, and the clouds, they were all down in the valley, but you saw the sun coming up. You could see another peak, I think it's Meru Peak in the distance, and it was an amazing, amazing place to be. So it made it all worthwhile.
And there's someone that's only, so I'm trying to think, so you mentioned Kilimanjaro's 5,000 meters, give or take.
Yeah,
so
it's
somebody
nearly
that's
6,000 actually.
6,000, wow. Okay,
Yeah.
so somebody that's, the highest I've ever been would be the top of Ben Nevis in Scotland, which is, I think, 1,300.
Yep.
What does it feel like, that acclimatization process? You're obviously warned to look out for things. What does it feel like? The higher you get, what's the sort of toll that it's taken on your body?
To be honest, now I look back, now I've done, I know we're going to talk about the Himalayas in a minute, but now I've trekked in the Himalayas, I've realised that when we went to Kilimanjaro, they took us up far too fast. Okay. The more time you spend acclimatizing, the better. But what it felt like, or what it does feel like being at altitude, is that your body becomes very sluggish. And when you're walking, for me, it felt like I had lead in my boots. Really heavy, just have a really heavy, sluggish feeling when you're walking. You get a bit of a headache. Altitude, that's probably another sign you're at altitude, you get a bit of a headache. You're encouraged to drink a lot. You have to drink at least 2 to 3 litres of water a day. So you're carrying a lot of water. Mm-hmm. But that's because you're encouraging the body to make more red blood cells. So the longer you take around it, the more chance the body has to acclimatise. So the only way I could describe it was, so when I got to the top of Kili, it really, had the sluggish feeling, had a thumping headache, and you could really tell I was at altitude. I think the only way I could describe it was a bit like being drunk, because you're dizzy and but also having the hangover at the same time.
That's not a fun type of drunk.
It's not fun. But as soon as you turn around, I think Kili's just under 6,000 meters. The exhilaration of being at the top, you forget a lot of the pain of getting there. But as soon as you turn around and start coming down, that some of that goes. You have to be really careful with it. And there's, for me, the headache, your body does adjust. But if you've got a piercing headache that doesn't go away, that's a sign that your body's not coping well with it. You get a rattling noise in your lungs if you're getting pulmonary edema.
What was it like when you reach the summit and you see the sunrise, which I can only imagine is spectacular? What is that feeling like? Is that something you can bottle up and recall? How long does it last? How long are you at the summit for?
Oh, I was at the summit probably only about 20 minutes or so, because it's also extremely cold. But I think so. I mean, to be honest, I'd lost all sense of time, to be honest. But you do. For me, it was a sense of awe because of what we could see around us. I think there was a sense of joy and excitement because the group of us had got there together.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd probably gone from probably an hour before while it was still dark and you're trudging up this mountain thinking, when's it going to end? Feeling I'm never going to do this. This is awful. Why on earth did I sign up for this crazy thing? To suddenly going, oh, wow, I've made it. It's amazing. It's just incredible.
So in terms of the descent then, she mentioned it was, what, 4 days up, 5 days up? Was that right?
For the
And do you
whole
come
trip, I
straight back?
think it was 3 days up and 2 days
Right.
down. It could
Okay.
probably have been better if it was 4 or 5 days up because it
Mm-hmm.
gives your body longer. So when I've trekked in the Himalayas afterwards, I've never been as high as Kili again, but I have been over 5,000 meters
Right.
and I've taken a lot longer to get there. And
So you
that has
mentioned,
been,
sorry,
yes,
Corrine.
I was going to say it's not been easy. I didn't have such severe symptoms of the altitude. And I think some of it with Kili is because you go too quickly.
Right. And what's that journey like on the way down? Like, is it still a special, or is it sort of, is it anticlimactic because it's more about just getting back to base? How does that descent
Um,
feel?
well, I have to say so you got the excitement of getting to the top.
Mm-hmm.
Then as soon as you start coming down, you lose the heaviness in your legs because you're coming down. But then you get the whole like, I'm actually quite tired here and I haven't had anything to eat and I'm a bit exhausted. So the thing is to get back to where you started from to get something to eat. But I also remember on our trek, I think he was a London taxi driver, but this guy couldn't summit. So he had to stay at this hut that we were at, Kibo Hut, and he wasn't able to go up because he had swelling in his eyes.
Mm-hmm.
But he sat on a rock all night and he clapped back every single person. He just applauded every person that came off that mountain. And I'll always remember him because I was really tired and really, you've got the exhilaration of the summit and then you're trudging back
Yeah.
down to get something to eat. And he's there cheering you on. It's like, yeah, that was great.
And that's a real testament to character because, you know,
Mm,
that individual clearly had aspirations of reaching the summit. Those
yeah,
aspirations have fallen short, but he's still there sort of, you know, applauding and cheering on everybody else. That's a real testament to
mm,
character. You mentioned the Himalayas,
yeah.
tell us about that because you've been to Nepal, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. Is it Bhutan?
It's Bhutan. Yeah.
Bhutan.
So I've been to Nepal, I'll say 4 times now, but one of those I was transiting over to Bhutan. So went there later. So obviously did Kilimanjaro quite a while ago. Went to Nepal the first time about 10 years ago. So I can't remember. Yeah, anyway, but again, wanted to go to Nepal. But it's just an incredible country. And we didn't go to Everest Base Camp, which lots of people want to go to Everest Base Camp. So my first trek in Nepal, I did something that's called the Annapurna Sanctuary Trek. Which takes you to Annapurna Base Camp. And it is incredible. And I think the first thing that struck me when I actually arrived in Nepal, apart from the fact that Kathmandu is crazy, once we flew up the valley and you see the mountains, just how big they are. Just incredible. You're up at, I've been to the Lake District a lot and we've got some lovely, beautiful places in the UK. But you're sort of 3, 4, 5 times as high as that and you're still in the foothills, the Himalayas. They just seem to go on forever. But yeah, it's very
Yeah.
different. Very different to Kilimanjaro. So, of course, Kilimanjaro, you're just there to get to the summit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this was the first time I went to the Himalayas. We were on an organised trek, so we were with a group. But it was a lot longer. It was over 2 weeks, and you're checking out through the lower areas where the vegetation is very different. As soon as you start getting towards altitude, because there's no greenery. Suddenly you're
Right.
covered by rock, and you get up into the snow, and it gets colder and colder. But again, it was incredible. I think again a great memory of mine was being at So the top part of the trek is Annapurna Base Camp,
Mm-hmm.
and camping there overnight. Um, it's just an amazing place. I had to get up in the night and it was cold and I didn't really want to get out of my tent, but I had to get out of my tent. But once I was out, it was just incredible because there's no light pollution. I've never seen so many stars. There's a full moon and the moon shining on the snow on these wonderful peaks. And it's very difficult to describe it, but it was a real connection with
Yeah.
nature.
And how long was that then as an expedition? So if Kili was sort of 5 or 6 days,
Yeah,
you've been
this would
trekking
have
in
been,
Himalayas.
I think the whole trek was probably 2.5 weeks,
Oh wow.
but
Okay.
that
And is that
includes
got
some time. So that some of that includes like getting into Kathmandu, then you have to fly for Annapurna, fly up to Pokhara, and then you're trekking. Then you've got to do that in reverse. So the actual trek was probably about 11 or 12 days.
and is that a guided trek? Are you with
That
sort of
one
local
was,
guides
yeah,
or
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We booked it and went through a guided trek. But later on, I've been certainly the most recent time. A couple of times I've been to Nepal. We've just been on a with a group of friends. We've used a local guide to support
Mhm.
us and to sort of guide us round, but a bit different to that first one was an organised trek that we booked from the UK.
Yeah, you mentioned that sense of wow, like seeing the Himalayas, and that's
Mm,
something I've only ever seen for a TV screen, but it kind of reminds me of the time when I saw the Grand Canyon,
mm,
and we'd all probably seen the Grand Canyon on TV. And if I'm honest, I didn't particularly want to go to Grand Canyon. We were going to Vegas, and I was a lot younger then, and it was like I just want to get to Vegas, and in my head,
mm,
I was losing a day at Vegas. And I remember when we got to Grand Canyon and we pulled up and we walked, it genuinely was like, wow, this is incredible. Like there is no documentary, there's no picture, there's nothing that can do it justice without seeing it, compared to seeing it with your own eyes. And just absolutely blew me away. And as soon as I was there, I was like, okay, I'm glad that I made the
mm,
detour. And straight away I was like,
mm.
okay, well, you sort of want to go exploring. There's so much to explore, to get down to the river, etc. It's just absolutely incredible. Um, so you mentioned obviously coming into Kathmandu, which is, I think you said it's kind of crazy or super
It is a
busy.
crazy place.
Yeah. So like, what's that like in terms of adjusting to the kind of local culture, being a tourist in I'm going to say an alien environment. I don't know if it is, but for me, it would sound alien.
Mm.
Being somewhere that I don't know, not knowing the language, the hustle and bustle. So what's that like? How do you? Because it sounds like as someone that's not very well traveled, there's almost an acclimatization to
Mm.
your environment, not the mountains itself, but the local culture and the hustle and bustle. So what's that like?
Yeah, it is. It's very, very different to anything I'd ever been to before. I think, my first trip to Kathmandu was a bit like, oh my God, what am I doing here? So we were with a group. So, the group will meet at at arrivals in the airport, and then you are guided by the local Nepalese out. And then you just dive into Kathmandu, and it looks. If you think the only way I could describe it is in the UK, like you've walked into a building site because there's just the roads all seem to be half built. There's traffic going everywhere. There's light cables all over the place, but it all seems to work. When I first went there, I just thought, my goodness, how on earth are we going to get anywhere? And like any Asian town, there's like beep beep beep, all the cars beeping at each other, the occasional cow wandering around in the middle of the town. But it does all seem to work. And I've been to Kathmandu 4 times now, and I think I
Right.
got a lot more used to it.
Hmm. Yeah.
But you can get, you're driven through the city, you go to your hotel, and in the hotel is completely different. It's completely calm. And then we walked out from the hotel down to an area that's called Tamil, which is where a lot of I suppose, I'm not sure what you say, lots of I suppose it is quite a touristy area. It's where all the tourists go. It's where a lot of the restaurants are, where a lot of the shops are. And that's nice. But again, it's busy, very, very busy. Um, I suppose adjusting to the culture. I probably didn't the first time I was there. I was like, every time I stepped out, I was like, oh my God, oh my God. But then I suppose as I've got to know, and we've got to know quite a lot of Nepalese people,
Right. Yeah.
you do adjust to it. And then the last time we went there, which was last year, we were actually invited to a Sherpa wedding. And that was a very different, but a very humbling experience. It was lovely to be invited completely into their homes and to see what happens at the wedding and meet all the family. Yeah, well, that was lovely. But we still had to walk down the dusty, half-built road from the house to the venue where the church was. But that's how it is in Kathmandu.
And you mentioned Bhutan.
Yes.
How does that compare and contrast to Nepal and Kilimanjaro?
Uh, it's very different. It's very quiet. So we flew from Kathmandu up to Bhutan. So you do fly along the valley past all the big mountains, past Everest, which is amazing. We flew into Paro in Bhutan, and you get off the plane and it's completely calm and quiet and serene compared to Kathmandu. Not as many people in Bhutan because they restrict the number of tourists that can go in. But it is incredibly, all I can say is a very quiet, peaceful country. I mean, obviously the mountains are similar height. So we did a trek to a place called Chomohari Base Camp, and then went up to a pass which is at 5,000 meters called the Bontilar. And that was the sort of high point of the trek. But we had to change what we were doing. It was in Bhutan. So in Nepal, you trek with guides, and then you have porters who will carry the luggage. Bhutan don't, they use horses to carry the luggage. And it had snowed very heavily, so the horses couldn't get over the pass. So we had to change. I think the horses went on a long way round, and we had to change our route slightly, which was fine. And we got to go into a typical house that people live in there. That was nice to visit them. And then everybody in Bhutan, not out on the treks, but everyone in Bhutan, so we were in Paro, which is the second city, they all wear their national dress all the time. And that is really lovely to see. And people are very friendly. I mean, both Bhutan and Nepal, people are just incredibly friendly. But, Bhutan, I think, is mainly a Buddhist country, and you just get that sense of calm and quiet and serenity in the whole place.
I'm smiling because I'm going to go off slightly on a tangent here, but I'm trying to slow down a little bit. So in terms of my sort of personal life, and I've been reading a book. What's it called? Wherever you go, that's where you are. I think, and it's written. But basically, it's about meditation and et cetera, et cetera. And I'm very, very early into it, but I smile because I'm trying to find a little bit of calm and tranquility and peace, and it's it's not easy, but yeah, it's something I'm aspiring to.
Yeah, and I think that is something the mountains do give you because they are so awe-inspiring. You often just stop and look and connect with these mountains as you're walking. During the day you're walking and you're chatting. If you're walking at altitude, you are walking slower because you have to.
Yeah.
But there is something about just slowing down and connecting. And it's very
Yeah,
easy to do it when you're surrounded by scenery like that. It's much easier to do it.
Yeah, we touched on this when we had a pre-chat about that sort of slowing down, because even I imagine when you're in a beautiful place like the mountains, etc., it's of course you're going to stop and appreciate what you are. But even just in everyday life, like I find the example I share is that I often like going trail running. So I like getting off the beaten path, and I like running across trails, public footpaths, bridleways, etc. And very recently, I just didn't fancy a run, so I went for a walk instead. And I went on a route that I've done frequently, through bridle paths, through some woodland, across fields. But the experience was completely different because when I'm running, I'm sort of having to watch my foot in. Usually the sound is me breathing, the wind, etc. But when I was walking, I was like, it felt like a completely different experience, and it did feel a bit more calmer and more peaceful. And I even stopped. I remember getting to like a sty or a gate. And again, if I was running straight through the gate, carry on. But I just thought I'm just going to stop for a minute and just listen. And it was just peaceful. It was just the birds and nature and I think there is something quite powerful to be said about that. About just sometimes just taking a step back and just connecting with nature, even in local grassland or woodlands, etc., etc. Can be quite
And that's why I
helpful.
started. No, I might be getting off on a tangent here, but this is why I
No,
started
good. I like tangents. Yeah.
doing outdoor wellbeing programs,
Hmm.
because I got so much from just being in nature, being in the mountains, and just stopping and listening and being
Mm.
present. It's so much easier to do it outside.
Yeah. So tell me about that, because I'd be interested to know about that then. So you run these sort of outdoor sort of well-being programs then. So what does that entail?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't run them for a while, but because of COVID, stopped a lot of it. But
Yeah.
I'm beginning to get back to it. So we would just meet up as a group, um, and somewhere outside. So it was always, you have to go prepared for whatever the weather is. And the idea would be to connect with nature. So I'd run, we'd share tools to slow down. So we'd start just with just stopping and breathing, which
Hmm.
obviously we all breathe, but we never actually stop and notice our breathing. And then you could just notice the group, everyone would arrive, and when you arrive, there's a buzz and a chatter, and I forgot this and forgot that, and I had a terrible journey, or la 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 la. And you go, right, I just put all that to one side and just breathe. Just notice your breathing, and you just notice the energy levels come down in a nice way, in a calming
Hmm.
way. And then we spend time walking and just being present and using senses, like you were saying, when you slowed down, you started hearing the birds.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
there's birds are there all the time, but we don't always hear them because we're too busy rushing around. So we spend some time doing that. And then we normally have a topic, because I'd do these monthly, and we'd have a different topic we talk about every month, which links to mental health, well-being. But it's quite light touch. People take it where they want it to go. I'd say we'd often finish with a short meditation, which I found very, when I first did it, I can't do meditations outside. People might see me. That'll be a bit weird. And then you just get used to it.
Yeah, no, I'm generally, it's something I'm trying to work on meditation. It's
Mm,
I can only get to like a couple of minutes so far. Sort of very much kind of trying to concentrate on the breathing, and
mm,
and I know it takes time. I find then my mind will wander off somewhere, but bit by bit, getting better at it. But it's interesting you say about the senses, about being outdoors. The biggest thing for me, and it can be as simple as just walking out, especially when we're working from home quite a lot.
mm,
Sometimes just for me, it's hard to describe it because it's not. I'm not even sure if it is a smell, but just stepping outside and smelling the air. Like
yeah,
now we talked about
mm,
the rain and stuff. I love that smell. Like especially when you've been stuck indoors in an air conditioned building or you're working from home, just going outside. And for me, of all the senses, that's the one that kind of lifts me up, makes me feel
mm,
okay.
yeah,
It's almost like a stress reliever. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think it's called petrichor, the smell of
Is
when
it?
it just had fresh rain. You'll have to check that because I can't quite remember.
Yeah, there's something about it. And there's always that first day of spring as well when you walk outside
Yeah,
and it's just got a slightly different, it's got that smell of spring, someone's cut their
yeah,
grass or it's a little bit warm. And
yeah.
it just lifts me up. Yeah.
And I think that was the main thing I noticed when we flew from, because Kathmandu is quite a polluted city. There's a lot of pollution in Kathmandu, whereas Bhutan stepped off the plane and just the smell of fresh air
Hmm.
was incredible. And
Do
just
you have
you
any,
mentioned meditation, but
mhm.
obviously I spent quite a lot of time trekking with guys who are Buddhists, and they say, well, the human mind will wander, and meditation isn't necessarily stopping, but it's about noticing. Some days you'll meditate and you find other days you might find, well, I'm thinking of this or that or the other, but it's just noticing and coming back and not worrying about that.
Yeah, my biggest takeaway, and again, I'm still on this journey, was that concept to be present, like be
Mm,
present in the
mm,
moment.
yeah.
And, yeah, that's something I'm working on. Even though it's with my kids, sometimes they'll ask me something and I can almost be a bit
Mm,
dismissive, etc. And it's like, no, be in this moment
yeah.
here and now. Like
Yes.
they want my attention for something, like be there present. So, and it's funny
Mm,
because I was talking to somebody earlier on. Actually, we were talking about well-being in the workplace and that, and
mm,
um, there are so many distractions in life, and I think those distractions just keep piling up with mobile phones and smartwatches and the blurred lines between home and work. I'd almost say it takes discipline now to try and apply filters to that
mm,
noise, because it just otherwise it just piles up, and it does take discipline. And I'm trying to actually, I'm not sure what the word is, take a digital detox. I'm
yeah.
very consciously trying to almost decouple myself from this smartphone that's sort of, you know, sort of, I wouldn't say become dependent on, but trying to get out of that sort of dependency on having to have a phone. It's like even when I go out with my kids sometimes, when we go to a country park, the only reason I'm taking my phone is because I want to take pictures of them. I want to take a picture or take a video, but inevitably then notifications start going off, or I'm just going to look at the sports news or whatever, and it's like, okay, there's an answer to that, which is go get a camera, go buy a camera, and then I can leave my phone at home, or go get so it's, I'm trying to work on that and try and recognize those sort of behaviors and try and come up with solutions to sort of, decouple myself from it.
Yeah, and I think being out in these places like the Himalayas, there's a lot of mobile phone coverage in a lot of the areas, but not all of them. However, electricity is quite difficult to come by. So you do start rationing, what's the most important thing I need this phone for? Well, I don't really want it to phone people or message people. It's there, I need it in an emergency, but it is there to take pictures.
Yeah.
And I do remember one night, because we would stay they're called tea houses, and the owner came out and said, you can either have some lights or you can charge your mobile phones, but you can't have both. The generator's not going to cope. And it does, it encourages you to switch off, because when you're checking your phone's in your bag, and I do tend to take a camera rather than rely on my phone, but it is quite nice to get away from it.
I know we spoke previously as well, so about how sort of walking, trekking, hiking has sort of helped you get through some difficult, challenging times. Are you okay to speak to that?
Yeah, and I think for me, the walking, the trekking, it supported me physically and mentally. So I think the first challenging time I had was before I'd even been to Kilimanjaro, before I'd done any of the big treks, was when my daughter was really poorly as a teenager. So she had chronic fatigue and was in a wheelchair. She'd gone from being a very sporty, very active teenager to being in a wheelchair in the space of 3 weeks. But as she recovered, we did start to walk together. And initially it would be just walking to the end of the drive and around the local area. And then we'd find nice places to go and walk. But there was the walking and the talking. I think those two things combined together were really good and really helped her. So then you can fast forward quite a few years. So I was diagnosed with breast cancer in the middle of COVID. It's quite, being diagnosed with something like that, you don't know what's going to happen. Felt completely fine physically, but had to go through 6 months of chemotherapy. So, which I didn't know how I was going to cope with or anything. And you feel like any control's taken away from you. You're sort of in the machine of being treated, which is brilliant. But you don't know what the outcome's going to be. You don't know how the chemicals are going to impact you. You don't know actually if it's going to cure you. And trying to get your head around something that says, you've got to be made ill to be made better is a really difficult thing to deal with. When you feel perfectly fine, you're like, well, I feel fine. I don't really want all this. Then go, well, if I don't have that, I'm not going to be fine. So anyway, I was, had to go into that. And what I discovered, because I'm terrible at, well, I'm not terrible, I'm fascinated. And I then discovered, my oncologist said to me, there's quite a lot of research, because he knew I was a big walker. He said, there's quite a lot of research. If you keep walking, your body handles the fatigue of chemotherapy better, because it does give you a lot of fatigue. So I was in on that, and I'm like looking it all up and researching it. And I thought, well, and there's very much, it gave me something to do that I felt I could be in control of. And I thought, I'll try it and see. And some days I'd be lying on the sofa feeling awful. And I go, well, no, I am going to go out. And my husband would say to me, well, fine, we'll go. But if you don't feel well, I'll just go and get the car and bring you back. And 2 miles later, I'd still be going. I think we should go home now. And there was just something about it that just, I don't know, kept my body going. And it did it coped with the fatigue and the chemotherapy quite well. Mm-hmm. To the point that I used to be my oncologist, because I was having chemotherapy every week for a while, for the first 12 weeks, and then every 3 weeks. But he'd always check in with me, how many miles have you walked this week? and and what you do. So it gave me like something to aim for, but I could see the results in how I dealt with it. And And it's a huge mental impact as well. So I think once you've dealt with the physical side of it, which I did, I had chemotherapy, surgery, radiotherapy, and then it hits you mentally. And I think at that point, being able to go out walking, talking to people really helped. And as you were talking about, being present is key, because there's sort of a fear of what might happen in the future. Certainly when you're being treated, well, is this going to work? I don't know. And you could just go down what I call what if alley, catastrophizing forever. And I'm not saying I never did that, but just being in the moment and outside allowed me to do that. And then having people to chat to as I walked was a real big help. And
And are you,
I do believe it helped me get through it.
yeah, and you in a good place now?
I'm in a great place now. And I
Yeah.
think, what I did at the beginning of the treatment also was I set some goals. One was I never knew how it was going to impact me physically. So I didn't know I'd ever go up a mountain again. But my first goal I set was to walk around Buttermere in the Lake District, because I love the Lake District, and Buttermere is one of my favourite places. And I did that, and I actually climbed Blencathra as well in the same trip, which I never thought I'd do. And I have been back to Nepal this year, and we didn't climb massively high. So I went to Lukla, which is at 3,000 metres, and we went all around visiting schools. So we were in very rural Nepal. So it was great to be back there. So I think, having it in mind that I wanted to get back out in nature really helped me get through it.
So I'm off to Lake District soon, and I know we spoke about this previously. I've got Buttermere on my to-do list, so I'm still not entirely sure where I'm staying, which I should do given I'm
Wow.
going in about a week. But if I'm close by, I'm going to make a point of visiting it. What I'm keen to know is, like, by comparison, Buttermere compared to Kilimanjaro and some of those treks in Himalayas, they're almost chalk and cheese. But what did it mean to you, like, given the circumstances? Because I imagine, given the circumstances, overcoming the adversity, set against a backdrop of the pandemic, etc., like say, catastrophizing, not knowing what the future holds. How did walking around Buttermere and accomplishing that goal compare to Kilimanjaro and Nepal, given the circumstances?
I think it was on a par, because it was a different physical
Mm-hmm.
challenge. I mean, I set Buttermere because I really didn't know. You read so much about the fatigue and how it impacts your body. I just didn't know whether I'd be able to cope with it. And I managed Buttermere quite easily. But it was just because I love it. It was just lovely to be there and be back there. And then to be able to climb Blencathra, which is one of my favourite mountains as well. And it took me a lot longer than it would have done. And I suppose some of there were parallels, because it was tough at times, but not tough because of the altitude, just tough
Mm-hmm.
because my body was healing. But to get up there and then be able to, and the weather blessed us with a beautiful day, and to be able to see all over Keswick and that area was just wonderful.
No, it must be. I mean, yeah, given the circumstances, that kind of real sense of accomplishment. And one thing I wanted to kind of circle back on before I forget. So you mentioned a few times in terms of some of the treks you've been on about the group that you're with.
Yes,
And
yes.
obviously you mentioned there about walking in Windermere and being with other people, how to
Mm.
have those conversations. So those groups, and I appreciate that there are different treks, different groups, etc. But are these people that you know? Are these people that you get to meet? What sort of relationships because I imagine you're sharing quite special moments together. You're spending a lot of
Mm.
time together.
Mm.
You're having these wonderfully unique experiences. So yeah, I'd be interested to know, from the human element, the sort of relationships you build on these treks.
Yeah, they're actually very deep. So, say for example, both Kilimanjaro and the Annapurna trek, I just booked on a trek. So with Annapurna, my husband was there as well, but we just joined a group and there were 12 other people there. None of us had ever met before. And within 2 or 3 days, you're sharing some of your deepest secrets and what's going on, and you do get a real connection. And then as you get to altitude, particularly with Kili, I suppose a little bit with the Himalayas as well, people cope differently with the altitude, and you kind of support each other. And you do get a deep connection. Some of the people I've met on treks have become lifelong friends.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I think you do.
And is this, correct me if I'm wrong, is this how So I want to get on to or talk about classroom in the
Classrooms in
clouds.
the clouds, yeah.
Yeah. So did this come about through? I guess first of all, it's probably, and I kind of looked at, but in terms of what is classroom in the clouds, and then how did that come to be? And that's through meeting people in Nepal, correct? And building these
Yes.
relationships.
Yeah. So the initial connection was through my husband.
Hmm.
So Classrooms in the Cloud is a charity that supports education in Nepal. So wanting children in Nepal to have the opportunities to be educated, reach their potential. And it was originally founded by trekkers, not myself or us, but sort of a generation before us. And they'd been out there and wanted to give something back. They met a guy called Dawa. So Dawa Galjan's Sherpa. He founded the charity in Nepal because he ran away from home to get education. And he lives in Lukla, in the Lukla region, so he ran away from home. So later on in life, he set up the charity. And then the English trekkers that met him then wanted to support him and founded the UK arm of the charity. So that's where it came from. So my husband was trekking. So he's been to Nepal more times than me, about 14 times.
Wow.
So one of his treks, he had a female Sherpa he met. He was doing Mera Peak, so quite a high. Was it Mera? I don't know, it doesn't really matter. Anyway, he was doing this peak, met this Sherpa, Mingma, she was called, kept in touch with her, and then a few years later saw that she was training to be a teacher. And he said, "Oh, you're being a teacher. I thought you wanted to carry on guiding and summit Everest." And she said, "Well, I did, but my father was killed on one of the tracks he was guiding, and my mum won't let me trek anymore, be a guide, so I'm training as a teacher." And she was being sponsored by Classrooms in the Clouds. So we found out a little bit more about it. So then we decided to sponsor her, and basically pay her wages, because by doing that, we were then impacting a whole load of children. Because we could have sponsored a child directly, but by sponsoring Mingma and supporting Mingma, we were then supporting more children. And then over the years, we've got to know the charity better. We've met Dawa. We know the team that basically run. We know the team that run it from the UK. We know the team that based in Nepal as well. So we got closer and closer. So the charity actually builds earthquake-proof or earthquake-resistant. I don't think anything can be earthquake-proof. Earthquake-resistant classrooms and sponsors teachers, with a particular emphasis on promoting females and wanting women to do well. So Mingma's moved on. Mingma's just had her second child. So she's taking a career break at the moment. She taught all the way through, and she had the first one, her daughter. A lot of the female teachers, they'll take the children to school and they've got them in little backpacks while they're teaching. And again, the big community, the teachers support each other, but she's just had a second child and she's taking a break. So we're sponsoring another teacher at the moment. And last year when I went to Nepal, we went out there particularly to visit the schools. We did a 2-week trek all around the schools and visited the schools, saw some of the classrooms, met the teachers, met a lot of the children.
How many schools are out there as part of the?
I think it's about 21.
Okay.
Should know, I've visited quite a lot of them, but I can't remember. It's about 21. I think we sponsored 26 teachers and it's about 21 schools. That might be slightly higher, but I can't remember.
So what is the education system like? How does it compare? Like somebody that again is very poorly travelled. What does the education system look like compared to what we know here in the sort of UK?
It's very basic.
Hmm.
A lot of the classrooms are very, very basic. You can see daylight through them, through the classroom outside. Obviously, we're trying to build classrooms that are better than that.
Hmm.
The facilities are basic, but they are all taught English. They're taught Nepalese. They're taught science. I mean, the Nepalese government do have a curriculum, and the classrooms in the clouds. We focus on early years teaching and supporting our teachers to do grade-based teaching. So we will bring some of the teachers over here So every year, a group of teachers will come out and they spend time in classrooms here learning from some of the teachers in the UK. But it is very, very basic. A lot of the children will walk 2 or 3 hours to get to school, have their schooling, then they'll walk home again, work on the farm. And a lot of the youngsters, particularly the girls, will leave school when they're about 14, maybe younger. And the
Yeah.
boys do as well. They're encouraged to leave work on the farms.
Yeah, the only experience that I've got that's probably even remotely comparable is back in 2007. I was fortunate to travel to Maziki in South Africa as part of a Habitat for Humanity expedition, where basically we spent a week there, sort of helping to build houses for local families
Mm,
and stuff. And I have to admit, it was incredible because the real sense of adding value, because we met the family, like we met the actual family that are going to kind
mm,
of live in this house, and again, I remember every morning we'd be on site and we'd be digging trenches, laying bricks, etc. And the children would come past on the way to school. And again, you know, typically a long walk, a long hike to get to school from their homes. But they on the whole, they were so happy. And
mm,
one of my fondest memories, and I've actually got to pitch this. I'm so happy. I had a football. I had a football, and the kids were all getting excited, and I just booted it and I just ran across this field, and these kids all started chasing me, and it was just the most amazing, wonderful experience because it was just as simple as, just kicking a football around.
mm,
It was amazing, rewarding, and I could have. It's one of those things where I could have stayed there. It's one of those things in a different life. I could have just stayed
mm.
there and just lived a very simple life of just helping to build houses. It was so rewarding,
Yeah.
and yeah, a magical experience. And it sounds like you're getting that sort of sense of sort of purpose and helping as well.
And we do a lot with the local communities. So obviously we'll build schools and work with the teachers, but we work with the local communities. Yeah, so coming back to our roles as business analysts, we often talk
Mm.
about different perspectives and understanding stakeholder perspectives. So take a lot of time to try and get into the shoes of the ward chair and they're like the local parish councils here, but what's the ward chair thinking? What are they doing? And trying to understand that. Plus, then you've got the layer of the Nepalese culture, and trying to understand that and how that works on top of it. It's fascinating, but it can also be very frustrating. Things take a long time to happen.
I'd be terrible with that. Yeah, I need the agile kind of constant feedback loop.
Mm, mm.
Have you got any sort of is there anything on your sort of like bucket list somewhere you'd like to visit that you haven't yet?
Oh yes, 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 yes. I'm going to Canada.
Canada.
We're going to Canada this year, actually, in about 7 weeks' time. So Canada's somewhere I've always wanted to go. I've had two aunts who've lived in Canada for a long time. Neither of them are here anymore, but I never got to go to Canada as a child, like for various reasons. I don't think my parents could afford for us to go out there. So I've always been fascinated by Canada and the Rockies. I've heard the Rockies are wonderful. I'd also like to, at some point, to walk the Camino de Santiago. And there's lots of Camino trails in Spain, so I'm thinking of which one to do. But I think it's the Camino Santiago runs across the top of Spain. One of those pilgrim routes. I'd love to do something like that.
Hmm.
So
And
I do.
how long and far is that?
I don't know how far it is. I think it's quite a long way.
Right.
But I don't. I'm not. I don't want to do it quickly. I just want to go and do it and enjoy it
Yeah.
and be up there. I think there's always new places to visit. Been to New Zealand. I'd love to go back to New Zealand. We didn't do a huge amount of trekking in New Zealand because we had a motorhome. You couldn't get it off the main roads down to the places we need to go so we can see the mountains. But yeah, and possibly we've not been anywhere in South America yet, so I might go somewhere over there.
UK. Is there anywhere in UK that you would sort of like to go?
Do a lot more in Scotland.
Yeah.
Haven't We've done a couple of Scottish mountains, but I'd like to spend a lot more time in Scotland. Definitely.
Yeah, yeah. Going back to our point earlier about sometimes, always rushing and not appreciating where you are.
Mm,
I've only actually been to Scotland 3 times,
mm,
and the 3 times I've been to go to Nevis, up and down, and then whoosh as part of like separate
mm,
free peaks challenges, and
yeah,
which is crazy when I think about it, because it's always been that the 3 times I've done the free peak have been as part of a 48-hour and then two 24-hour attempts. So it was literally just drive, get there, up and down, jump in a car, and I'm like, yeah, I'd like to go back and just slow it down because it's
mm,
so beautiful. I just remember on the drive up there, driving by some of the lakes,
mm,
the locks, sorry, and it's just incredible, incredible scenery. And as a keen cyclist, that's on my to-do list, like to just cycle up
yeah,
that way. I know it's pretty tough in terms of the weather and wind can be pretty tough on a
mm,
bike up there, but just looks incredible. Yeah.
mm. I think I learnt my lesson about slowing down on a British mountain. Oh no, Welsh, yeah, British in Wales, Snowdon. So we climbed Snowdon up a fairly unusual route, got to the top, had some lunch, and then because it's quite flat, so I went skipping off across the top, not really
Mm.
paying attention, rushing to get off, and I tripped up and broke my arm.
Oh,
So
really?
there you go. Slow down, pay attention.
Yeah, I've not done that. I've gone too fast on my bike a few times
Mm,
and come off and paid the price. But yeah, I think if there's nothing else, a key takeaway for me is, yeah, slow down, and I
yeah,
am working on it. Yeah, slow down
slow
and
down and
appreciate.
notice the scenery. And I think, my last place, I've been here to this place before, but I'll always love to go back, is Slovenia. That is the most beautiful country. That definitely gets me
Mm,
saying down. I think Lake Bled is well known, but Lake Bahinj is just incredible. Very peaceful place to be.
brilliant. I'm conscious of time, so I just want to say thank you very much. It generally has been a kind of real pleasure, and um, as someone, like I said, that's got this sort of wanderlust, but I've not really been able to apply it overseas. Just kind of hearing your sort of stories about what it's like to trek in Nepal and Bhutan, etc., is pretty incredible, as well as the sort of the work you do with Classroom in the Clouds.
Mm.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Corinne. It really is appreciated. What we'll do in the show notes, I'll kind of put links to Classroom in the Clouds if people want to know any
Yeah, that'd
more.
be great. Thank
Um,
you.
but is there anything else you want to kind of give a shout out to or mention?
I don't think so. I think, if anyone's listening who's ever thought about trekking, has never done it, I think just go out, try it, and enjoy
Just
it,
go
and
for
slow
it. Yeah.
down.
Slow down. Yeah.
Yeah,
Brilliant. Well, on that note, thank you very much, Corinne. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
yeah, thank you.